A gentle early morning in Rome, the stillness before the city stirs. Marcus Aurelius opens his eyes. The first light of morning spills through the thin linen curtains, turning the walls of the imperial chamber a pale golden gray. The room is quiet, not the kind of silence that demands to be filled, but the kind that holds everything together. Outside, the city of Rome still sleeps under its own weight. Stone archways wrapped in shadow, streets resting before they fill with sandals and shouts and cartwheels. But inside these walls, the only sound is breath, the slow inhale and exhale of the emperor himself, Marcus Aurelius, as he lies awake, not rushing to rise, not eager to linger, just present, just breathing. The chamber is sparse for a man of his position. There is no lavish clutter. The bed is wooden, sturdy, and undecorated, covered with a single coarse blanket and a small headrest. No ivory, no gold. A small table stands nearby with a clay oil lamp still burning faintly from the night before. A basin of water waits in the corner. This simplicity is not accidental, it is deliberate. Marcus chose to strip away the excess, what most emperors would consider necessities, to remind himself daily, fortune can vanish, titles are borrowed, only the self, shaped by virtue, truly belongs to him. As the light continues to brighten, Marcus slowly sits up. He does not jump from bed, nor does he command attendance with impatience. He closes his eyes again and takes a deep breath, filling his lungs with the crisp morning air that seeps in through the high windows. The room smells faintly of wax and dusted stone. He listens, to nothing in particular. The stillness is enough. This is a sacred moment for him, not because it is grand, but because it is honest. The first thoughts upon waking are not directed outward. He does not consider battles, decrees, or disputes. His mind turns inward. He asks himself a simple question: what am I alive for? Not in the grand philosophical sense, though those questions will come, but in the most basic form. What is today for? What is this breath for? He leans forward, elbows resting gently on his knees, hands folded. And here in the dim morning, before servants begin to stir and the affairs of the empire return to his doorstep, Marcus Aurelius remembers his own words, the ones he once carved into wax tablets and now keeps etched in his heart. When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. He does not always feel this privilege, of course. Some mornings are heavier than others. Some come with the ache of age in his knees. Others come with grief, the kind that lingers in the chest. Even emperors are human. Even emperors wake with doubt. But this quote is not meant as a performance. It is a reminder. Even on the hard mornings, especially on the hard mornings, he repeats these words as a kind of anchor. To be alive is not something to take for granted. To be able to rise, to have the chance to live well today, that is enough. That is the starting point. He breathes again, this time more deeply, slower. His hands now move across his forearms, brushing away the cold of the early air. No fire has been lit yet, and he prefers it this way. The chill is not an inconvenience, it is a teacher, a reminder that nature does not conform to comfort, that strength is not the avoidance of discomfort, but the calm acceptance of it. This is how he trains his mind, not by avoiding the cold, but by meeting it without resistance. A soft knock echoes from the far end of the chamber. A servant brings warm water, as he does each morning, then withdraws silently. Marcus acknowledges him with a slight nod, but says nothing. Silence is still the ruler of this hour. There is no rush to break it. He walks slowly to the basin and washes his face. The water is not hot, but clear and bracing. It sharpens the senses. As he pats his face dry with a linen cloth, he looks toward the open window. Beyond it, the rooftops of Rome are still quiet. A few columns catch the morning sun. The Tiber flows somewhere in the distance, unseen but always near. The city waits. It will erupt into noise soon enough, but not yet. And so, he returns to his bench near the bed. He takes up a small wooden tablet, one of many, and a stylus. This is his moment to write, not to publish, not to persuade, just to reflect, to record the state of his soul before the day begins to mold it. He writes slowly, deliberately, with pauses between each line, Some mornings it's just a sentence, other times a page, but always the same intention, to remind himself of what he can control and what he must let go. He writes not as an emperor, but as a man who strives, not always successfully, to live by reason, to act justly, to remain humble, a man who knows that no title can make him good. Only his choices can do that. Outside, a bird begins to sing, the first voice of the city. Marcus closes his tablet and sets it down. He breathes again, and again, slowly, deliberately. He is not hurrying into the day. He is entering it like a man steps into cold water, with presence, with awareness, with a willingness to be shaped by what comes, without clinging to what was. There is no ceremony, no trumpets or declarations, just an old man rising slowly in the early light of Rome, grateful to feel the floor beneath his feet, the air on his skin, and the weight of one more day. The emperor washes in silence. The cold water stings at first, but he does not flinch. The basin stands in the corner of the chamber. It is made of simple bronze, worn but clean. Marcus Aurelius stands before it, half lit by morning light, now filtering through the window a little stronger than before. There is no steam rising from the water, no warmth to ease the transition from sleep to waking. It is cold, startling even, but this is no mistake. He prefers it that way, not because he enjoys discomfort, but because he understands its purpose. The cold water reminds him of what matters, of what does not. He dips his hands in first, and the shock tightens the muscles in his fingers. He pauses, breathes, then splashes his face. The cold bites at his skin, waking him fully. He does not rush. Each motion is measured, unrushed, intentional. The water moves down his face in slow trails, dripping from his chin, soaking into the fabric of the cloth he uses to dry. His eyes remain calm. There is no grimace, no performance of strength, just steady, quiet discipline. This ritual, basic as it may seem, grounds him. There are no perfumes, no exotic oils, no polished attendants holding scented towels, just water and cloth, just breath and skin. Even as emperor, with access to the finest luxuries the empire can provide, Marcus chooses simplicity. He owns ornate baths elsewhere in the palace, and certainly he could order warmth, servants, incense. But that would be indulgence, not necessity. And what is unnecessary to him is a kind of burden, a danger. He once wrote, "It is the mark of a small mind to spend much time on things of the body." And so he reminds himself of this truth each morning by limiting the care he gives to physical comfort. It's not about denial for its own sake. It's about clarity, about remembering that comfort and luxury are not the same as peace. In fact, they often cloud it. He takes the cloth and begins to wash his neck, shoulders, arms, slowly. The cold travels with each stroke, but so does a kind of focus. The mind sharpens when comfort is removed. Each sensation becomes clearer. There is no escape into warmth, no distraction, just the moment, the motion, the breath. This is his training, not in war, but in awareness. He trains his mind to remain still when the body resists, to observe discomfort without letting it dictate his reaction. And in this training, there is freedom. Because if one can remain calm in cold water, one can remain calm in a cold world. Once clean, he dries his skin with the same linen cloth. The fabric is rough, coarse in places, not soft. Another reminder, life is not designed to be smooth at every turn, nor should it be. To demand softness from every moment is to weaken oneself, and Marcus has no intention of becoming weak, not in spirit, not in body. He moves next to his garments, neatly folded on a small wooden bench. There are no extravagant robes, no silks from the east, just a tunic made of clean plain wool, dyed in earth tones, brown, perhaps faded white. His belt is leather, worn from use. There is something beautiful in their ordinariness. They serve their function, nothing more. As he dresses, his movements remain quiet. His tunic slips over his head, arms sliding through the sleeves. He tightens the belt without ceremony. Each gesture is deliberate but never stiff. It is in these motions repeated every day that Marcus finds discipline, and within discipline a kind of inner peace. He reflects, as he pulls on his sandals, on how many in Rome measure worth by appearance. the shine of fabric, the height of a heel, the glitter of rings. But he knows better. He has seen emperors before him crumble under the weight of luxury, softened by comfort, corrupted by pleasure. He writes to himself, if one has nothing to strive against, one becomes nothing. And so he continues to strive, even in the smallest choices. A cold wash, a simple robe, a humble sandal. The Stoics taught that happiness lies in virtue, not possessions, that to need less is not to suffer, but to become free. And Marcus holds this principle like a shield, especially in the palace, where temptation whispers from every wall, and softness waits in every room. As he straightens his tunic, he looks toward the window again. The sun is now rising more boldly, stretching its light across the tiled floor. He stands in it for a moment, letting it warm the skin the water had chilled. There is no rush, no hunger for the next step. He is not eager for the tasks ahead, but he does not dread them either. They will come, and when they do, he will meet them, with presence, with simplicity. There's a quiet strength in denying excess, in choosing restraint when one has the power to indulge. Marcus knows this strength, and he nurtures it every day, not for display, not for praise, but because a man who cannot govern his own desires is unfit to govern anything else. Even now, fully dressed and prepared, he feels no need to adorn himself further. He wears no crown, no rings. The only adornment he carries is his bearing, the quiet dignity of a man who knows what is enough. Outside, the palace begins to stir, footsteps in hallways, distant voices. But in this room, simplicity still reigns. The emperor stands ready, not as a ruler obsessed with grandeur, but as a philosopher committed to truth. Not a truth written on scrolls or shouted in forums, but the kind found in stillness, in patience, in the decision to meet cold water with calm, and to meet life with the same. The emperor sits in silence, stylus in hand, and begins to write, not to an audience, but to himself. The light through the window is stronger now, but still soft. The day has not yet begun in full, and this hour belongs to no one else. This is when Marcus writes. Not letters to generals, not decrees for the Senate. These are not words meant for the world. They are written in private in the silence of a still room, on a wax tablet balanced gently across his lap. His stylus is simple, wooden, plain, and the wax is already marked with faint scratches from past mornings. He begins slowly. There is no rush. He doesn't write for beauty or polish. The words are often raw, sometimes repetitive, always honest. He writes to himself, not as emperor, not even as philosopher, but as a man trying to remain grounded, centered, and awake to what truly matters. The words serve as a mirror, a conversation not with others, but with his own mind. He examines his thoughts the way one might study their reflection in still water, not to admire, but to understand. He writes, "You could leave life right now, let that determine what you do, say, and think." And then he pauses. He's written this before, perhaps many times, but that does not make it any less urgent. The point is not novelty. The point is memory, repetition, rehearsal. If you truly remembered that you might die today, how would that shape what you care about? Would you still argue over trivial matters? Would you still chase applause? Would you waste time being angry or offended or consumed by small annoyances? He breathes in and lets the thought settle. Then, with calm focus, he carves more lines into the wax. Don't act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good. This is the pulse that runs beneath his writing each day, the knowledge that time is not promised, that this very moment is already slipping into the past, that life is a loan, not a possession. To others, he is an emperor, a ruler of vast lands, but to himself, in these quiet pages, he is simply a man facing the same truth everyone must face, whether rich or poor, soldier or slave. The truth that life is short, and so what matters is how one lives it. He thinks of the temptations he must resist daily, the pull of power, the flattery of advisors, the comfort of indulgence. He writes about these things not because they surprise him, but because he needs to remember. Philosophy to him is not a set of facts. It is a discipline, a practice. a way of seeing clearly when the world tries to blur the lines. In the wax, he scratches another thought. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. It is easy, he knows, to forget these things, especially when surrounded by people who constantly say what they think he wants to hear. But the truth is not something that bends to status. It either is or it isn't. And his job, first and foremost, is to be a servant of truth, even if it costs him comfort, even if it makes him unpopular. Better to lose favor than to lose his own self-respect. He shifts slightly on the wooden bench, adjusts the tablet in his lap, and continues. The stylus moves slowly. There is no need to hurry. These pages are not a task to complete. They are a kind of morning ritual, a philosophical stretching of the soul. Just as the body must be washed and dressed, so too must the mind be prepared for the day ahead. Sometimes his writing turns inward, almost painfully so. He scolds himself for losing patience the day before, for letting anger rise too quickly, or for speaking too sharply to a servant. He writes not to punish, but to improve, to remind himself that he is always a student, never a finished product. He doesn't write for history. In fact, he assumes no one will read these words. That's what makes them honest. These are not speeches. These are tools, mental instruments to help him navigate the storm of the day ahead. The more clearly he can see his own faults and motivations, the better chance he has of correcting them, of living not as a puppet pulled by impulse, but as a man guided by reason and principle. He scratches again into the wax. It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. He learned this from Epictetus, and repeats it often to himself. If a man insults him, it is not the insult that wounds, it is the meaning he attaches to it. If misfortune strikes, it is not the event, but his reaction that causes suffering. The mind is powerful, but undisciplined, it becomes a tyrant. With training, it becomes a trusted friend. Outside the room, the world begins to stir. He hears the distant clatter of sandals on stone, voices of servants in other chambers. The empire is waking, and soon it will demand decisions, attention, judgment. But for now, he stays rooted in this moment, carving one last reminder into the wax. What stands in the way becomes the way. Obstacles are not to be feared, but used. Pain, disappointment, failure, these are not the enemies. They are the raw material from which character is shaped. He doesn't ask for an easy life. He asks for the strength to meet life as it is, with calm, with integrity, and with a heart that does not flinch. He sets the stylus down, closes the tablet. For a moment he simply breathes, not as a ruler, not as a Stoic, just as a man, alive for now, and deeply aware of what that means. Marcus Aurelius sits alone at a plain wooden table, his back straight but relaxed, his movements slow. Before him rests a modest breakfast, a small bowl of ripe figs, freshly picked and still bearing the scent of sun-warmed earth. A loaf of dark bread, firm and slightly cracked on the surface. A few olives, bitter, wrinkled and full of flavor. And beside them a cup of warm wine, thinned slightly with water, as was the Roman custom. There's nothing lavish here. No golden dishes, no excess, just nourishment. Just enough. He lifts a fig between his fingers and examines it, not with the hunger of someone desperate for food, but with the quiet attention of someone aware of where it came from. The fig is soft, its skin slightly split at the top, revealing the dark pulp within. He takes a bite, slowly, carefully. He chews without distraction. He lets the taste linger. This is not indulgence, it's appreciation, a moment of intimacy with the world that provided it. He picks up a piece of bread and breaks it in two. The crust falls slightly onto the table. He dips the edge into the wine, softening it just enough, and eats. His chewing remains steady. Each bite is its own moment. He doesn't eat like a man feeding an appetite. He eats like someone who knows that even a meal can be a form of meditation. In silence he thinks of how this bread came to be, the wheat harvested in the countryside by farmers who rose before the sun, their hands calloused from the cycle of planting and reaping. He thinks of the figs picked by workers whose names he'll never know, of the olives cured in salt and thyme, of the vineyard that produced the wine, watered by the same rain that once fell over the hills of Latium. He considers the chain of hands, the invisible labor, and the quiet intelligence of nature that makes these things possible. The Stoics often spoke of living in agreement with nature, and here Marcus sees that principle on his plate. Nothing on this table is artificial. Nothing is manipulated to appear more than it is. Each thing has come to him through the slow, ordinary processes of the earth, and he honors them by not rushing, by not overindulging, by not turning food into entertainment. He does not eat until he is full. He eats until he is no longer hungry. There's a difference. And that difference, he believes, is where discipline lives. He recalls the teaching of Musonius Rufus, that self-control is not about denying pleasure altogether, but about not being ruled by it. Even the sweetest fig can become bitter if one eats without restraint. He drinks the wine slowly. The warmth spreads through his chest, steady and mild. There is no excess. He is not trying to escape through taste. He is simply here, in this quiet hour, grateful to be alive, nourished, and aware. The wine, like everything else, is taken with temperance. He glances toward the small window where the sun is now casting longer rays across the tiled floor. A few birds pass overhead, their silhouettes flickering briefly in the light. Marcus watches them without moving. He thinks about how effortlessly they exist, never accumulating, never hoarding, never needing more than what is present. They rise with the sun, find what they need, and ask for nothing beyond it, a life governed by necessity, not desire. Then his mind turns almost inevitably to those in Rome who will go without food today, the poor who sleep in the streets near the market, wrapped in thin cloaks, the children who scavenge for scraps, the soldiers who march in the cold, far from their families. He knows that as emperor his table could be overflowing, but that would only deepen the gap between his life and theirs. And what kind of ruler lives above the people rather than among them? He reminds himself that gratitude must come with awareness. To enjoy this bread without remembering those who have none would be a kind of blindness. And so he uses each meal not just to feed his body, but to sharpen his conscience. What do I truly need? He asks himself. What am I clinging to that is not necessary? He thinks too about those who once had everything and still felt empty. Senators who dined with 10-course meals, surrounded by silver and music, but who could not sleep at night. Generals who conquered nations yet could not conquer their own restlessness. The truth is simple. If you need more than what nature gives freely, you are already poor. He takes another olive. The taste is sharp, slightly sour, slightly sweet. It pulls him back into the present. He chews slowly, feeling the skin split, the oil coat his tongue. Another reminder that nature does not rush, nor does it waste. Everything has its season. Every tree gives what it can, when it can, and no more. He wonders what it would mean to live like that. The cup is nearly empty now. A few drops of wine cling to the rim. He sets it down gently, then places his hands flat on the table. He does not speak. No one is there to hear him, and words would only disturb the quiet. Instead he bows his head, not in prayer to a god, but in reverence for the moment itself, for the gift of a full stomach, for the gift of stillness, for the awareness that this morning, this meal, was enough. He does not rise immediately. He allows himself to sit with the feeling of completion. Not fullness, not satisfaction, but sufficiency. This is what the Stoics meant by wealth, not having more, but needing less. And when he finally stands, he leaves no trace of the meal behind. The table is clean, the silence remains, and the gratitude he carried into breakfast now follows him into the rest of the day. The emperor enters the chamber with a calm mind, not to speak, but to listen. The council room is not extravagant, though its height and marble columns might suggest otherwise. The light is brighter now, spilling through tall windows and casting long shadows across the tiled floor. A semicircular table dominates the space, surrounded by chairs filled with senators, generals, and officials, men of ambition, opinion, and influence. They sit upright, some already speaking in hushed tones, others flipping through wax tablets and scrolls. The hum of politics begins to rise like a low murmur. But when Marcus Aurelius steps into the room, it softens. Not because he commands silence with fear, but because he brings with him a gravity that asks for presence. His presence says, "This moment matters, speak carefully." He takes a seat at the head of the table, not rushed, not stiff. He sits as though the chair was no different than a bench in the garden. He places his hands gently on the table, one atop the other, and looks around. The meeting begins not with speeches, but with silence. Marcus listens. He allows the others to speak first, not because he lacks authority, but because he understands that power is not in dominating the conversation. It is in understanding it fully before contributing. Each man at the table brings an issue, a provincial conflict, a dispute over taxes, an argument about military logistics. They present their opinions with urgency, sometimes with frustration. Some interrupt. Some speak as though their voice should carry more weight. There are moments of pride, defensiveness, even subtle competition. Marcus watches it all unfold like a river flowing past him. He sees their gestures, hears their tones, notices who leans forward and who crosses their arms. But he does not react, not yet. He breathes slowly, evenly. Patience is his armor. He reminds himself that appearances often mask intention. A raised voice may hide uncertainty. A boast may be a cover for fear. If he judges too quickly, he risks missing the truth beneath the surface. And truth, not ego, is what he's here to find. A younger official speaks harshly about another, accusing him of negligence. The room tenses. All eyes flick to Marcus. He does not flinch. He does not chastise. He simply turns to the accused and asks for his perspective, giving him space to respond. There is no display of power, just a measured question. This, he believes, is what real authority looks like. Not reaction, but clarity. Not punishment, but understanding. Inside he may feel the stirrings of irritation, the temptation to raise his voice, to correct or criticize, but he resists. He reminds himself, what good is power if it cannot master the self? The Stoics taught that the only true mastery is over one's own mind. What use is ruling an empire if you cannot rule your own tongue? He waits until every voice has been heard. Then, and only then, does he speak. His words are simple, not poetic. He doesn't speak to impress, only to clarify. He summarizes what has been said, weighs the merits, and offers a decision when needed. Sometimes he simply suggests more thought. Sometimes he asks a question that reveals what no one considered. His words do not fill the room. They direct it, like a river guided by stone. What sets Marcus apart is not that he has more power, it's that he uses it with restraint. He understands that power has a strange way of making people forget themselves. The more one is obeyed, the easier it is to assume one is always right, and nothing he knows is more dangerous than a man convinced of his own infallibility. So he holds his authority with care, like one would hold a flame. It can illuminate, or it can burn. As the discussion continues, Marcus remains still. He touches his face occasionally, rubs the bridge of his nose, nods slightly. But there is no excess, no outburst. The restraint he practices each morning, in the cold water, in the silence of his journal, in the slow chewing of bread, now becomes his greatest strength at this table. The ability to pause, to observe, to wait before acting. He thinks often of the teachings of Epictetus. It is not events themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. And here in this council room, that lesson is alive. He watches as others react to each other's words with emotion, with fear of being dismissed or eagerness to appear wise. But Marcus returns again and again to that inner place of stillness. He lets the words pass through him. Only what is essential remains. He sees the temptation in others to use clever speech to win approval. But he reminds himself that flattery is a kind of rot. It looks like friendship, but it eats away at truth. He does not reward those who tell him what he wants to hear. He listens most closely to those who challenge him respectfully. For what is the point of surrounding oneself with advisors if they are only mirrors of your own opinion? As the meeting nears its end, Marcus offers closing remarks. There are no dramatic conclusions, no final decree that echoes in the halls, just a calm summary. a reminder of principles, and a few soft-spoken decisions. The room begins to shift as men rise, some content, others carrying the quiet weight of disagreement. Marcus stays seated a moment longer. He watches them go. He thinks not about how well he performed, but whether he stayed true to his principles. He knows that leadership is not about always having the right answer. It's about creating space where truth can emerge, where fear doesn't silence honesty, and where ego is not the loudest voice in the room. It is about bearing the weight of power without being crushed by it, about being calm when others are restless, about remembering that one day someone else will sit in this seat, and that what matters is not the title, but the character of the man who holds it. And so he rises slowly, not triumphant, not tired, just steady. The decisions have been made, the words have been spoken, and now the day moves forward. He walks out of the council room with the same quiet dignity he carried in. For Marcus Aurelius, leadership is not a performance, it is a practice, one that begins each morning in silence and extends into every room he enters. A walk through the palace garden. Each step is quiet, each breath is deliberate. The garden waits without judgment, teaching without words. After the weight of decisions and the careful restraint required in the council chamber, Marcus Aurelius chooses to step outside, not into the streets of Rome, nor into the grand halls of the palace, but into the garden, a quieter place where the world softens and thought moves at the pace of wind and root. He walks slowly, not as one inspecting property, but as one paying silent tribute to the earth. The path beneath his sandals is lined with gravel, its sound gentle and rhythmic underfoot. The morning air is crisp but no longer biting, softened by the sun that now hangs above the rooftops. His toga shifts slightly with each breeze, the fabric brushing against leaves as he walks by. He passes under an olive tree, its twisted branches hanging low. The leaves shimmer faintly in the breeze, silvery on one side, green on the other, small, subtle things that most would overlook. But Marcus does not overlook them. He watches them flicker in the light, thinking of how even the simplest plant with no voice and no ambition can still respond gracefully to the wind. He pauses at a small herb garden. The scent of rosemary and sage hangs in the air, fresh and grounding. He brushes his fingers gently across the tops of the plants, then lifts his hand to his nose. The oils cling faintly to his fingertips. A reminder again that the earth gives generously, without need for applause or recognition. These plants grow because that is their nature. They do not strive to be more than they are. They do not compare themselves to the trees. They simply are. And that, he thinks, is wisdom. Farther down the path, a lizard darts across the stone, disappearing under a bush. Marcus watches it vanish without alarm. It did not fear him specifically, only movement, as all small creatures do. He wonders how many lives pass unseen each day, how many dramas unfold beneath the shrubs, in the soil, under the stones. The garden is not still because nothing happens. It is still because it asks for no attention, and yet everything here is alive, moving, becoming, dying, returning. He walks on, pausing occasionally to admire a flower or to study a crack in the wall overtaken by moss. Each small detail reminds him of the same truth. Everything changes, everything decays, nothing clings to life. The petals that bloomed so brightly this morning will begin to wilt by dusk. The tree that stands tall today will one day fall, and so will he, so will all men. This isn't a thought that troubles him, it's one that sets him free. He recalls a line he once wrote to himself: "Observe how all things change. Nothing clings to life." The lesson is not morbid, it's clarifying. To observe change is to understand the true rhythm of existence. The garden does not mourn the falling leaf. It makes room for it to return to the soil. Nature wastes nothing. What falls becomes the ground for what grows next. Why then do humans cling to every comfort, every opinion, every plan, as though the world owes them permanence? He reaches a small fountain, its water flowing gently over a stone basin. He sits beside it, listening to the soft trickle. He watches the surface ripple, disturbed slightly by the breeze. The water is never still for long, but it never resists motion either. It simply follows the shape of what it encounters. This too is a lesson. The Stoics spoke of adapting to what life gives, of flowing with fate, not in passive surrender, but in intelligent acceptance. Water, he thinks, is not weak. It is persistent, adaptable, and in time, it wears down even the hardest stone. He plucks a small leaf from the edge of the fountain. It's already browning at the edges, still soft, but fading. He turns it over in his hand. What was once green and new now carries the weight of time. And yet, even in its fading, there is beauty. The edges curl in elegant lines. The veins are more visible, more defined. He thinks of human life in the same way, how age reveals the essence of things, how death is not an error, but a completion. In this moment, surrounded by vines and whispers of wind, he feels no need to speak. The garden speaks without words. It tells him that life is not to be rushed, that silence is full, not empty, that patience is not the absence of action, but the maturity to wait for the right season. He continues walking, this time a little slower. A bee passes by, moving from flower to flower with purpose, a symbol of diligence, unaware of the empire it helps build with each flight. Marcus smiles faintly at this. How strange that so much of life is held together by creatures who never once questioned their place in the world. He thinks of the council again, of the men speaking with urgency and certainty. And yet, in this garden, there is no need to prove anything, no urgency to be heard, no pressure to be right, just the quiet rhythm of things doing what they are meant to do. Perhaps he thinks this is the kind of leadership the world needs, not loud but rooted, not reactive but aware, to rule as nature rules, calm, giving and constant. He comes upon a bench shaded by a cypress tree. He sits, folding his hands in his lap. Above him, the leaves sway gently, casting shifting patterns of light on the ground. He closes his eyes, breathes deeply, and lets the world continue without him for a while. In this space, nothing is urgent, nothing is lacking. The garden needs no emperor to function, it needs no instructions, it teaches by simply being, and Marcus, in his stillness, becomes its student once again. Visiting the Stoic tutor Junius Rusticus. In the company of a wise man, the emperor becomes a student again. As the day continues to unfold, Marcus Aurelius makes his way through a shaded corridor of the palace. His steps are steady, purposeful, but not rushed. The stones beneath his sandals are cool, the air slightly warmer now, filled with the distant sound of birds and rustling leaves from the garden he left behind. He's not headed toward an audience hall or a senate chamber. He's going somewhere quieter, somewhere smaller, to the room where his old tutor, Junius Rusticus, waits. It is not an official visit. There are no guards, no attendants, no ceremony. This is something more personal, something sacred. Rusticus is already seated when Marcus arrives. The elder philosopher leans slightly forward in his chair, his hands folded neatly in his lap. His beard has grown whiter with the years, and the lines on his face speak not of bitterness, but of time well spent thinking. He greets Marcus with a nod, not as an emperor, but as a pupil returning to learn. And Marcus, for his part, bows his head, not in theatrical reverence, but in quiet acknowledgement of the man who helped shape him. They speak softly. There is no need for raised voices. Between them, the conversation moves slowly, like a river around smooth stones. They don't waste time on flattery or pleasantries. There is too much they've already shared. Years of lessons, corrections, difficult questions, and careful answers. Their bond is built on honesty and the kind of respect that only grows when ego is set aside. Today they speak of Epictetus. Marcus has been rereading his discourses, and there is a passage that has stayed with him. He recites it from memory. We suffer not from the events in our lives, but from our judgment about them. He pauses after the words, letting them hang in the air, and looks to Rusticus for his thoughts. Rusticus smiles faintly, nods once. He speaks slowly, as he always does. He reminds Marcus that Epictetus was once a slave, and that his teachings carry a kind of authority that comes not from status, but from hardship. Anyone can repeat philosophy, Rusticus says, but living it, especially when life is cruel, is something else entirely. And that is why Epictetus matters, not because his ideas are clever, but because they were forged in struggle. Marcus listens carefully. He does not interrupt. He takes in the words like water drawn from a deep well. Even now, after all these years of ruling, of writing, of studying, he knows that his learning is not complete. Wisdom is not something one arrives at. It is something one continues to approach slowly, humbly, with eyes open. Rusticus goes on to talk about the difference between knowing and becoming. A man can understand the Stoic ideals, recite them, even write books about them, but if he still lets anger rule him, or desire distract him, or pride blind him, then the philosophy remains only on the surface. The real challenge, he says, is to carry Stoicism not just in the mind, but in the heart, in the bones, in the way one treats others when no one is watching. Marcus nods again. These words are not new to him, but that doesn't matter. Wisdom does not lose value through repetition. In fact, it gains clarity. Hearing them again in this quiet room, from the voice that first introduced him to the Stoics, brings a new layer of understanding. He thinks of how easy it is to forget these truths in the chaos of governing, in the noise of the court, in the subtle pull of admiration and power. Philosophy, he realizes, is not something you study once and move on from. It must be returned to daily, like a fire that must be tended. They speak of humility. Rusticus reminds him gently of the dangers of praise. That men will say whatever they think will please an emperor. That power attracts flatterers the way light attracts moths. And that a wise man must constantly guard against the temptation to believe what is most comfortable to hear. Marcus takes this to heart. He's seen it already, how easily pride can disguise itself as confidence, how self-righteousness can creep in when one is constantly deferred to. It's why he writes in his journal so often, to remind himself that he is a man, not a god, that his soul is not superior because he wears a crown. Rusticus shifts the topic to self-examination. He asks Marcus softly what he struggled with most this week. Marcus doesn't deflect, he doesn't pretend. He speaks of losing patience with a senator, of feeling a surge of irritation he didn't express, but still felt. He speaks of waking one morning with a heavy sadness he couldn't name, and how he sat with it, wrote about it, and tried not to push it away. Rusticus listens without judgment. Then he offers a thought, that sometimes the true strength of a man is not in suppressing his emotions, but in understanding them without becoming them. Marcus breathes in these words like fresh air. He knows that listening is not weakness, that to admit uncertainty is not to surrender authority. In fact, he feels more whole after these conversations, more stable, more grounded. There's something healing in this exchange, a recentering. It reminds him that wisdom isn't something to perform for others, it's something to quietly live. They sit together for some time in silence. Neither feels the need to fill the space. In that silence, Marcus reflects on how rare it is to find someone who speaks not to be heard, but to be useful. Rusticus is not interested in being clever. He is interested in helping others become better. This, Marcus thinks, is the highest kind of friendship, the kind rooted not in entertainment, but in shared commitment to truth. Before parting, Rusticus offers one last piece of advice, a simple line: stay close to your principles even when they hurt. Marcus repeats it quietly to himself. Then he stands, bows his head again, and takes his leave, not as a ruler walking away from a subject, but as a student walking away from a teacher, stronger, not because of what he said, but because of what he heard. Governing Rome with steady hands. Each decision, no matter how small, carries weight. The emperor knows this and moves slowly, carefully, never in haste. Back in his private study, Marcus Aurelius sits at a long table strewn with scrolls, tablets, and wax-sealed messages awaiting his judgment. The room is quiet save for the occasional rustle of parchment and the soft scratch of a stylus. A shaft of sunlight pours in from a high window, illuminating the dust in the air and casting golden light across the smooth wooden surface. This is not a chamber of spectacle. There are no statues, no symbols of imperial pride, only the tools of responsibility. Here, power is exercised not through command but through care. In front of him are decrees that need signing, orders to be issued, disputes to be settled, reforms to be approved or rejected. These are not abstract concepts. Each decision will affect real people: a farmer in the provinces, a merchant in the port, a soldier waiting for payment, a widow seeking justice. And Marcus, though emperor, does not treat his position as a privilege. He treats it as a duty. Every scroll, every line of ink is a test of his character. He picks up his stylus slowly, not with hesitation, but with intention. He reads through a petition from a distant governor, requesting more grain for his region. Before signing anything, Marcus pauses. He doesn't simply calculate numbers or consider political advantage. He tries to imagine the people this grain will reach. The children who will sleep with full stomachs if he approves. The men who labor in the fields, whose work depends on nourishment. Then he thinks about fairness. Are other regions in greater need? Is the governor trustworthy or merely seeking favor? Each layer of the decision must be considered. Ruling justly requires more than knowledge. It requires compassion and restraint. Only after this quiet reflection does he sign. The strokes are slow and deliberate. He writes not just his name, but his intention. There is no flourish to his handwriting. It is clean, firm, and purposeful. He sees no need for extravagance in a signature. What matters is the clarity of judgment behind it. This process repeats itself, scroll after scroll. Some decisions come easier than others. Others weigh heavily, pulling him into deeper thought. A legal dispute between two senators. A letter from the army requesting additional resources. A tax exemption plea from a flood-stricken village. None of these are trivial, and Marcus knows that shortcuts, ruling by impulse, by favoritism, or by emotion, only create more suffering in the long run. As he moves through the work, he reminds himself of a core truth. The obstacle is the way. These problems, these demands, these long hours, they are not interruptions to his life's purpose. They are his purpose. The frustrations of governance, the tedium of administration, the discomfort of constant judgment, these are not things to resent. They are the raw material from which a virtuous life is shaped. Difficulty does not block the path. It is the path. To serve others well, even when tired or misunderstood, is how strength is refined. There are moments when the burden feels heavier, when the names blur together and the ink begins to smudge under his hand. But Marcus doesn't push the feeling away. He lets it pass through him. He returns to his breath, to the silence of the room, and grounds himself again in purpose. This is not about me, he tells himself. It is about Rome. It is about what is right, not what is easy. He thinks back to the Stoics who guided him, how they taught that true freedom comes not from avoiding responsibility, but from embracing it with integrity. That to govern well is not to control everything, but to meet each moment with justice, temperance, and wisdom. He recalls the words of Epictetus that we are not disturbed by things but by our opinions of them. And so he trains his opinion. He chooses to see each decision not as a weight, but as a chance to act in harmony with reason and virtue. Another scroll lies before him, a request to pardon a man sentenced for theft. Marcus reads carefully. The man stole bread for his family. The law is clear, but justice is not always rigid. He closes his eyes for a moment and imagines the man's face, the fear, the hunger. Then he writes a note to the magistrate. Let the man go free, but ensure he is given work. Mercy, he knows, must walk alongside discipline. They are not enemies, they are twins. He continues this work for hours, pausing only to stretch or sip from a cup of watered wine. The rhythm becomes meditative, thought, judgment, writing. Not once does he allow his title to cloud his thinking. He does not ask, what benefits me, but rather, what serves the whole? This shift, from self to others, is what transforms authority into service. It is what keeps a ruler from becoming a tyrant. By the time he finishes the last decree, the light in the study has shifted. The sun is higher, and the day has moved forward. He places the stylus down and looks over the table. Each signed document is a reminder of the quiet work required to keep Rome whole. There is no applause, no celebration, but Marcus feels a deep, steady sense of completion, not satisfaction, but alignment. He rises slowly and walks to the window. Outside, the streets of Rome are beginning to stir more loudly. Voices rise, carts rattle, and the life of the city pulses on. He watches for a moment, hands resting behind his back. These people do not see him now, do not know the choices made on their behalf this morning. But that's the point. Leadership is not about being seen, it's about seeing clearly, even when no one is watching. He closes his eyes and reflects again on the words that guide him. The obstacle is the way. In every scroll he signed today, in every decision weighed, he walked the path of difficulty. And in doing so, he did not drift from his purpose, he walked deeper into it. Reflecting on the past in the library. Among the thoughts of the dead, the emperor finds clarity for the living. Marcus enters the library alone. It is a place of stone and silence, with tall shelves holding scrolls instead of books, and rows of marble busts peering out from alcoves. Their faces, etched in soft, fading lines, belong to those who once shaped the minds of men: Socrates, Plato, Heraclitus, Zeno. Some faces are stern, others contemplative, all are still. They do not speak, but Marcus feels their presence, not as ghosts, but as reminders that wisdom does not die with the body. It lingers in words, waiting patiently to be discovered again. The air is dry, carrying the faint scent of aged parchment and olive oil used to preserve the scrolls. Dust particles drift through beams of sunlight, slow and aimless. There are no torches burning here, no noise echoing off the walls. Only the quiet rustle of robes and the occasional creak of a chair as Marcus lowers himself into his usual seat, a modest wooden bench near a central table. It is worn smooth from years of use, from mornings spent reading, pausing, thinking, writing. This space is sacred to him, not because it is grand, but because it is honest. In the library, titles and roles fall away. He is not emperor here. He is a student, like any other man who has ever sought understanding. He unrolls a scroll containing the dialogues of Plato, letting it stretch across the table in a gentle arc. His eyes follow the lines slowly. The words are familiar. He's read them many times, but familiarity does not lessen their depth. If anything, returning to these pages again brings new clarity. Wisdom, he knows, reveals itself gradually. Sometimes it takes years of living to finally grasp the meaning of a sentence read in youth. So he reads again, not to finish, but to feel, to absorb the rhythm of Plato's questions, to walk the maze of dialectic thought and allow it to stir something within him. He pauses often, not because he is tired, but because the thoughts require space. He rests his stylus against a tablet nearby and writes a brief reflection. To know what is good, one must first learn how to listen not only to others but to oneself. He sets the stylus down and leans back slightly. That idea didn't come from Plato directly. It came from the silence between sentences. That's what this room gives him, room to think between the thoughts of others, not just reading but digesting. Next he turns to Heraclitus, a different scroll, shorter, more cryptic. The words of Heraclitus are not clear instructions, they are fragments, flashes of fire and water and paradox. No man steps in the same river twice, he reads. He traces the line with his finger. He's always loved that thought, how it captures the truth of change so completely. Everything moves, everything becomes, nothing remains fixed, and yet, within that flow, there is an underlying order, a reason woven into the chaos. Nature is not random, it is simply beyond prediction. And to live in peace, one must learn not to control the current, but to move with it. Marcus writes again, even the river that destroys feeds the land it passes. He does not know if the line is poetic or useful, but he writes it anyway. Sometimes clarity arrives later, long after the ink has dried. He leans back, taking in the room again. The marble busts continue to watch. He thinks of Epictetus, whose teachings Rusticus first brought to him as a young man. Epictetus, the slave-turned-philosopher, whose words have guided him through countless trials. He finds the scroll and opens it carefully. He reads slowly. Some things are in our control, others are not. A truth so basic, and yet so easily forgotten in moments of anger, fear, or pride. He reflects on how many of his own anxieties have come from trying to control what lay outside his reach: the behavior of others, the outcome of war, the praise or blame of the crowd. How much peace he could have kept had he remembered this line more often, and how much more work remains to live it fully. He writes again deliberately, "Control is not about power over events, but over response. That is enough." Silence deepens. The room holds it kindly. In this space where no one is performing, where words are written instead of spoken, there is no pressure to prove anything. Marcus realizes that true learning happens not in speaking loudly, but in listening closely, not in having answers, but in asking better questions. Wisdom does not shout. It does not demand recognition. It simply waits, ready to be found by those humble enough to seek it. He lets his hand rest on the edge of the scroll. He thinks about how many men have read these same words, how many centuries have passed since they were first spoken. Yet the truths remain, because truth is not bound by time. It does not wear out. It lives in quiet corners, in the margins of thought, in the silence between distractions. He remembers something Rusticus once told him: "Do not seek to be remembered, seek only to understand." It has stayed with him, this advice. He knows the world will remember him as emperor, but he hopes more than anything that he will be remembered as someone who tried to live rightly, who tried to think clearly, even when the world was loud. He rises from the bench, leaving his stylus and tablet behind for a moment. He walks slowly past the busts, pausing briefly at each one. He does not whisper prayers or recite quotations. He simply acknowledges them, with a quiet nod, with a breath of gratitude. These men, though long dead, gave him the tools to endure what life demands. Their voices, preserved in ink and parchment, still speak. As he reaches the doorway, Marcus Aurelius looks back once more. The scrolls remain open on the table. The dust in the air still moves in shafts of light. Nothing has changed, and yet something within him has settled, not resolved, but steadied. That is enough. The questions will return, the doubts, the decisions, the weight of the world. But for now, in this room of dead philosophers, he has remembered how to listen, and in listening he has found peace. A Stoic approach to conflict and disagreement. The stillness of the library doesn't last long. Before Marcus Aurelius can return the scrolls to their shelves, a soft knock echoes at the entrance. A young attendant enters, bowing low, then stepping aside for a senior official who bears the tense, hurried posture of someone carrying bad news. His face is pale with anxiety, his brow furrowed. He speaks quickly, too quickly, words tumbling out in a rushed tone that tries to sound respectful but is colored by worry. A dispute has erupted in one of the provinces. A general, long thought loyal, has refused to comply with an imperial order. He claims his authority is being undermined. Worse, letters have been intercepted suggesting the general is rallying support among local governors. The official presenting this information seems unsure whether he's warning of disobedience or the start of a rebellion. Either way, he expects the emperor to be alarmed, or angry, or decisive. Marcus, however, does none of those things, not immediately. He listens, eyes steady, shoulders relaxed. He lets the man finish, not interrupting, not reacting. When the room falls silent again, Marcus doesn't respond with outrage or swift judgment. He does what he always does. He breathes, slowly, fully, once through the nose, then out through the mouth. This breath is not just a physical act, it is a discipline, a pause between stimulus and response, a sacred moment in which reason is allowed to speak before emotion drowns it out. He walks over to the nearest window. He looks out, not at the city, not at the horizon, but at a single olive tree swaying gently in the breeze. This is his way of thinking, not to stare at the problem, but to step slightly beside it, so he can see it from a different angle. He lets the words settle. He separates what is known from what is uncertain. He reminds himself, you always have the option not to have an opinion. This is one of the most powerful tools in the Stoics' toolkit, because most suffering, he knows, comes not from what happens, but from what we think about what happens. He turns slowly and begins to speak, not loudly, not forcefully, but clearly. First, he asks for clarification. Where exactly did this message come from? Who verified it? What was the exact wording? What orders preceded it? He breaks down the situation into pieces, separating fact from rumor, reality from projection. By doing so, he removes the fog of emotion from the room. Fear, once examined closely, often loses its shape. Then he speaks of the general, not as an enemy, not as a traitor, but as a man. What pressures might he be facing? What misunderstandings may have led him to believe his authority was being challenged? Perhaps he feels isolated, uncertain, forgotten. Perhaps his pride is wounded. Marcus does not excuse the action, but he refuses to reduce the man to a label. He sees the situation not as an offense to his power, but as a challenge to his patience, his discipline, his capacity to lead with wisdom rather than force. Anger, Marcus knows, is the easiest response and the most destructive. It feels powerful in the moment, but it clouds judgment, poisons conversation, and escalates conflict. Anger is the mind's way of retreating from complexity into the illusion of control. But Stoicism teaches something harder and better. Understanding without indulgence, firmness without cruelty. He walks to his desk and takes a tablet. He begins to write, not a declaration of punishment, but a letter of inquiry. It is calm, composed, and designed not to provoke but to clarify. He asks the general to explain his reasoning. He expresses concern, not accusation, and he reaffirms a shared goal, the unity of Rome. In doing this, Marcus is not being weak, he is being strategic. He is choosing to hold the tension without snapping the cord. Because once trust is broken by impulsive judgment, it is almost impossible to restore. He remembers another line he once carved into his own journal. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. If the general acts out of pride, then the worst thing Marcus can do is respond in kind. He must be the counterweight, not the mirror. By refusing to match emotion with emotion, he shifts the balance of power, not toward domination, but toward resolution. The official watching this process seems puzzled at first. He expected an order, a reprimand, maybe even a warning of war, but instead he's watching a man think, slowly, calmly, as if even in the face of defiance, there is no emergency that justifies abandoning principle. Marcus meets his eyes and says quietly, "We do not respond to fire with fire, we respond with water." There is a lesson here, and Marcus feels it deeply. He knows that disagreement is not an enemy, it is a reality of life. People will misunderstand you, some will challenge your authority, your vision, your values. The test of a man is not whether he can avoid conflict, it's how he behaves when it arrives. Can he remain steady when challenged? Can he see clearly when others are lost in the fog of feeling? Can he be an anchor, not a wave? He thinks of his own failings, times when he did react too quickly, times when he allowed frustration to cloud his words. Those moments return to him now, not to shame him, but to remind him of the ongoing work of self-mastery. He is not finished. No one is. And perhaps that is why he returns to Stoic teachings day after day. Not because he has mastered them, but because life constantly gives him new chances to try. The letter complete, Marcus seals it with wax and hands it to the attendant. "Send it with care," he says, "and tell the courier not to rush. It is more important to arrive calm than to arrive first." With that, the message is sent, a response born not from ego, but from clarity. He returns to the window once more. The olive tree still sways. Nothing dramatic has changed, but something subtle has. A tension diffused, a decision made without anger, a small act of leadership rooted in stillness, and that, Marcus knows, is where the real power lies. The Emperor as a father. In the quiet presence of his children, the Emperor lays aside the world's weight and embraces something softer, something eternal. After hours of decisions, scrolls, and disputes, Marcus Aurelius finds himself in a different room, one that smells faintly of wax and cedarwood. filled not with officials or philosophers, but with the softer sounds of laughter and rustling fabric. His children are here, spread across a tiled floor warmed by the sun. A boy leans over a wooden game board, carefully sliding pebbles into grooves, his brow furrowed with focus. A younger girl sits nearby, holding a doll made of cloth and straw, humming quietly as she braids and unbraids its hair. Another child, barely old enough to walk, clings to the hem of Marcus's robe, wide-eyed and waiting to be lifted. He kneels down, gently scooping the smallest child into his arms. The motion is practiced, natural. Despite the stiffness in his joints from age and long hours of sitting, he doesn't grimace. His body adjusts because his heart leads the way. Holding the child against his chest, he feels something shift, something subtle, a rebalancing. The world with all its demands fades just slightly, and he becomes not a ruler, not a stoic thinker, but simply a father, a man before his family, not above them. They begin a game, something familiar, stacking small blocks of carved wood, trying to build the tallest tower without it falling. Marcus plays along with the patience of someone who knows that winning isn't the point. His moves are slow, deliberate, allowing space for the children to succeed, to learn, to laugh when things topple over. He doesn't correct them too quickly, nor does he impose rules where none are needed. The game, like life, teaches better through gentle experience than through constant instruction. Yet his guidance is always there, subtle, never heavy-handed. When one child reaches too quickly and knocks over another's piece, Marcus leans in and calmly says, "What would kindness do here?" He doesn't scold. He questions. He invites reflection. And in that space, the child's face softens. An apology is offered. The game resumes. This is how he teaches, not with long lectures or strict commands, but with small deliberate moments that shape character slowly, like rain shaping stone. Kindness, gentleness, restraint, these are not words to him. They are daily practices, habits to be cultivated in the quiet moments when no one else is watching. And what better soil for them than the hearts of his children? He thinks often about the kind of world they will inherit. Rome is vast, full of splendor and danger alike. There are lessons he must give them, not about politics, but about how to live with dignity when the world tempts you to chase power, pleasure, or pride. He teaches them not to seek admiration, but to live in a way that needs no applause. He teaches them to be firm without being cruel, to be strong without forgetting to be tender. When a child grows frustrated, losing a game or making a mistake, Marcus is there, not to fix the problem but to model composure. Even emperors lose sometimes, he says with a soft smile. What matters is whether we stay true to ourselves. They don't always understand the full meaning of his words, but they hear the tone. They feel the calm. And that, he knows, is often more powerful than the lesson itself. As they play, he watches them closely, not to supervise but to observe, their faces, still soft with youth, their hands, small and eager, their joy, unguarded. He marvels at how fleeting these stages are, how quickly a child's laugh becomes a teenager's questions, how swiftly innocence gives way to understanding. The Stoics taught to embrace impermanence, to let go of what will inevitably change. But here in this room, Marcus feels both the joy and the ache of that truth. These moments will pass, these children will grow, and he will not always be here. That thought doesn't darken his mood, it deepens it, because knowing this time is temporary makes it sacred. It reminds him to be fully present, not distracted by matters of state, not thinking of tomorrow's letters or yesterday's disputes. Just here, with them, breathing the same air, sharing the same light. At one point the youngest child falls and begins to cry, not from injury but from frustration. A block tower has collapsed again. Marcus doesn't rush to fix it. Instead, he sits beside the child and simply places a hand on their back, a silent gesture, a steady presence. "Sometimes things fall," he says softly. "That's how we learn how to build better." The child sniffles, looks up, and slowly begins again. Marcus watches and feels something settle inside him. Maybe that's all parenting really is. Being there when they fall, and showing them how to stand back up without fear. As the sun begins to lower in the sky, casting a golden glow through the window. Marcus knows the time with his children will soon end, for now. Duties await, messages to review, another round of decisions to be made. But he also knows that nothing he does today, not even the affairs of empire, will carry the same quiet weight as this hour. He rises and kisses each child on the forehead, not with formality, but with love, a love that expects nothing in return, a love grounded not in possession or pride, but in care. He knows he cannot shield them from everything, but he can prepare them, not for comfort, but for strength, not for ease, but for resilience. And as he walks away, he does not look back out of longing. He walks forward with gratitude, carrying their laughter with him like a quiet melody, because in them he sees life as it truly is, fragile, fleeting, and beautiful beyond measure. Lunch, a pause in the day. The day continues, but the pace slows. Time to eat, not to indulge, but to remember what it means to be alive. The midday sun rests high over Rome, casting soft shadows beneath the arches and colonnades of the imperial grounds. Inside, in a quiet room away from noise and obligations, Marcus Aurelius sits down for his midday meal. The table is small. There is no silverware, no lavish arrangement, no feasting crowd. Just him, a servant or two waiting nearby in silence, and the food, a simple plate of warm grains, perhaps barley, soaked and steamed just enough to soften it, a slice of goat cheese, white and crumbly with a hint of brine, a few dried figs, and a small bowl of honey, golden and thick, catching light like it was poured from the sun itself. There's also a jug of water, cool and clear, and beside it, a piece of coarse bread. This is enough, more than enough. Marcus lifts the bread with both hands, feeling the rough texture between his fingers. He breaks off a piece, dips it in the honey, and chews slowly. There's no urgency, no distraction. He's not speaking, not reading, not doing anything but eating and thinking. Each bite becomes a moment of attention. The sweetness of the honey contrasts the salt of the cheese. The grains settle in the stomach with warmth. He does not eat to impress or distract himself. He eats because the body must be cared for if the mind is to function. He thinks about how easily meals can become performances. In the palaces of other rulers, food is often excess, plates overflowing, wines from distant lands, endless courses with rare ingredients, each more complicated than the last. But indulgence, Marcus knows, is a kind of forgetting. When a man fills himself with too much, he loses the ability to appreciate what is simple. He becomes numb to flavor, to hunger, to gratitude. He stops listening to his body and begins feeding something else, his ego, his boredom, his restless dissatisfaction. So Marcus chooses less, because in less he finds clarity. He drinks a cup of water slowly, no added herbs, no cooling stones, just water as it is, enough to refresh the mouth and ease the food down. He feels its temperature, its weight, the way it moves in the mouth and throat, and for a moment he marvels at it. How strange that something so ordinary could be so essential, that without this invisible thing, this clear, tasteless liquid, there would be no life. He thinks about how often he forgets such things, how easy it is to ignore what keeps you alive because it's always there, until one day it isn't. As he continues his meal, he turns inward, not in sadness, but in awareness. He thinks about the body itself, not as something to be worshipped or displayed, but as something to be understood. The way it tires, the way it heals, the way it hungers and digests and slowly changes. Each cell working without command, each breath a quiet miracle. And yet, it all moves toward a single end. The body, like everything else in nature, is temporary. It will grow old, it will weaken, it will stop. That is not tragic. It is natural. And the acceptance of that truth makes the present moment sharper. He takes another bite of cheese and reflects, this may be the last time I eat this meal. Not because he expects death today, but because nothing is promised, not even another lunch. So he does not rush through it. He does not look past it. He meets it fully, as if it were a conversation with life itself, a quiet exchange between man and nature. The food says, "Here I am, take what you need," and Marcus replies, "Thank you, I will take only what is enough." That word returns again and again in his philosophy. It is not a word of limitation but of freedom. To have enough is to stop chasing. To eat enough is to leave the table clear-headed, not bloated. To want enough is to live without envy. And in this meal he finds that truth confirmed. He does not need more to feel satisfied. He only needs to be present with what is already here. After finishing his plate, he sits for a moment, hands resting lightly on the table. His stomach is not full in the way a feast would fill it. It is simply content, balanced. His body feels calm, his mind clear. He breathes, not deeply, not dramatically, just naturally, as if the breath, like the food, has found its rhythm again. He looks out the window beside him, where the sunlight pours across the floor. A shadow moves slowly as a cloud passes overhead. He watches it shift. Impermanence again. Nothing stays in one place. Not the sun, not the shadows, not his own thoughts. But he doesn't cling. He lets it move, just as he lets the meal pass through him, gratefully, gently, without attachment. He takes a small cloth and wipes his hands. He nods once to the servant who quietly clears the dishes. There is no grand statement to mark the end of this pause, just a feeling of completion. The moment has passed. The meal is over, and yet something remains. The calm it brought, the gratitude it stirred, the awareness it rekindled. Marcus stands slowly. The duties of the afternoon will begin soon. But for now, he walks away from the table lighter, not only in body but in mind. Not burdened by what he didn't eat or what could have been served. Content that what he had was sufficient, and that, he reminds himself, is all a man needs. Not more, not less, just enough. Walking among the people of Rome. Even an emperor must return to the streets, not to be seen, but to see. In the late afternoon, after the heat has begun to fade, but before the streets become too crowded with the noise of evening life, Marcus Aurelius leaves the palace grounds. Not with a full entourage or the display of imperial guards, but with a small cloak draped over his shoulders, the hood pulled loosely forward. He walks with only a few discreet attendants at a distance. Sometimes he goes entirely alone. He does not do this to hide in fear or mystery. He does it to remain close to what matters, to remember that he is not only ruler of Rome, but a part of it, that he too belongs to the same dust, breathes the same air, and will return to the same earth as those who call him emperor. He does not speak much as he walks. His steps are slow, not hurried. He passes through narrow alleys and wider roads, watching the rhythm of Roman life unfold around him. Vendors call out from wooden carts, offering bread, olives, and herbs. A butcher wipes his hands on his apron. A child clutches her mother's dress. A group of laborers laugh as they sit on a stoop, their hands stained with stone dust from a day's work. The smells are thick: smoke, sweat, food, life. He breathes it all in, not with disdain, but with reverence. This is Rome. Not the marble columns, not the forums, the people. He meets eyes when he can. He nods silently to the baker whose hands never stop moving, shaping loaves from dough. He offers a brief smile to the old woman seated on the steps of a temple, her body frail, her bowl empty but her gaze steady. Sometimes he leaves a coin. Sometimes he simply leaves presence. Not all needs are material. Some people simply need to be seen. He walks past the sick too, the ones shunned by the crowds, lying wrapped in cloth near fountains or slumped in shaded corners. Some cough, some sleep, some watch the sky as if trying to remember something lost. Marcus does not turn away. He does not rush past. He looks gently and holds that pain for a moment. Not because he can fix it with a glance, but because he refuses to ignore it. As he walks, the line returns to him. What injures the hive, injures the bee. This idea is central to him, that no man exists alone, that every injustice touches all, that suffering, even when it belongs to someone else, diminishes something in him too. He believes Rome is not strong because of its walls or legions, but because of its people. And if they fall, he falls with them. An emperor who forgets this truth becomes something dangerous, untethered, isolated, hollow. But Marcus wants to remain human. Even as the world lifts him up, he insists on staying grounded. He watches a father teaching his son how to carry a jug of water without spilling it. The boy stumbles, and the father laughs, not in mockery, but in patience. Marcus smiles faintly. He remembers doing the same with his own son. He thinks of how many tiny moments like these build a life. They are not recorded in scrolls or praised in speeches, but they are the substance of what matters. Effort, failure, patience, love, all of it, repeating endlessly in every street. He listens too, not just with ears, but with attention, to the chatter between two young men arguing over philosophy, to the complaint of a vendor scolded by a magistrate, to the soft songs sung by washerwomen hanging clothes in the breeze. These voices remind him that the city breathes without him, that he is part of a larger body, one that moves with countless limbs and hearts, each with its own joys, fears, and burdens. Sometimes, when he finds a quiet spot, he pauses to write. A few lines scratched onto a small tablet he carries with him, thoughts like seeds. Do not be ashamed of needing help. We all need it. Or, the same sun warms the poor and the rich. The same earth will hold us when we die. These reminders are not just for others, they are for himself, to remain awake, to resist the illusion of separation. He passes a small fountain where children play. Water splashes, laughter rings out. A girl notices him, curious but unsure, sensing something important in this quiet man who watches with kind eyes. He nods once, then turns and continues walking. He does not linger to be recognized. Recognition is not the point. Presence is. By the time he returns to the palace, the light has changed. The golden glow of late afternoon now deepens into something softer, more muted. The streets behind him begin to buzz louder, the night preparing to arrive. But Marcus carries with him the echoes of what he saw, not the noise but the humanity, the closeness of it, the truth of it. And in his heart the Stoic idea deepens, that we are all citizens of one great city, that each man, woman, and child is part of the same whole. To hurt one is to harm all. To lift one is to strengthen the entire body. He steps through the palace gate, removes his cloak, and breathes. The emperor has returned, but more importantly, the man has remembered who he is. Afternoon letters to the frontline generals. Words carry weight, especially when they travel miles across the empire, to men holding swords instead of pens. As the sun lowers toward the western edge of the sky, Marcus Aurelius returns to his study, this time not to sign laws or read scrolls, but to dictate letters. A low table stands before him, covered with wax tablets and parchment. At his side sits a scribe, stylus ready, head bowed slightly in anticipation. These letters are not for politicians or philosophers. They are for generals stationed at the frontiers of the empire, men leading legions in cold, wind-beaten regions, far from the comfort of Rome. Men whose lives, and the lives of those they command, depend on clear decisions, steady guidance, and above all, the calm of a ruler who thinks before he speaks. Marcus sits in silence for a moment before he begins. He looks out the window to the fading afternoon light, searching for the right starting point. These letters are not mere updates or orders. They are messages to comrades shouldering burdens he understands well, even if he no longer marches beside them. In each line, he tries to offer not just instruction but encouragement, steadiness, and purpose. Because war is never just a matter of tactics. It is a test of the soul. And these men, hardened by cold and fear and exhaustion, need more than strategy. They need reason. They need clarity. He begins to speak slowly and clearly. The scribe listens carefully, scratching each word into wax with practiced precision. To Claudius Maximus, he begins, "You have shown restraint and courage in the face of uncertainty. The recent skirmish near the Dacian border was not a defeat. It was a reminder that the path of virtue is not always paved with victory." He pauses and leans forward, thinking of Maximus's face, of the man's tired eyes and strong voice. then continues, "Remember that your strength lies not only in the sword, but in your judgment. A general who cannot govern himself will soon fail to govern others." These are not empty phrases. Marcus chooses each word with care. He knows that to those on the battlefield, Rome can feel like a distant myth. The emperor can seem like a shadow, unreachable, and so he writes as if he's sitting beside them at the fire, sharing warmth and wisdom, not superiority. He makes no promises of ease. Instead, he speaks of duty, not as burden but as purpose. He reminds them why they fight, not for conquest but for the stability of the people who trust them, for the peace that comes only after chaos has been endured with integrity. In another letter, addressed to General Publius, who faces rising unrest in the east, Marcus speaks of balance. "You must act firmly," he says, "but never lose sight of mercy. Justice that forgets compassion becomes cruelty in disguise." He knows how easy it is, under pressure, for even good men to become cold, to forget that every rebel slain is a son, a brother, a father. War hardens the heart if the mind does not guard it. And so he reminds his generals, "You do not command machines, you command men, and men are fragile, even when they wear armor." Between letters, Marcus takes small pauses. He drinks water. He looks again at the horizon. The weight of war is never far from his mind. Though he sleeps in a warm room, eats regular meals, and walks among gardens, he's deeply aware that others are bleeding, starving, dying for the idea of Rome. He does not glorify this. He does not romanticize sacrifice, but he respects it, and because he respects it, he does not waste it. He reflects often on the nature of leadership. How strange it is, he thinks, that so many men chase power, only to find themselves surrounded by fear and uncertainty. Real power, he believes, is not in commanding others, it is in commanding oneself. In writing these letters, he is practicing that. Each sentence must be true. Each thought must be rooted in reason. He cannot allow his mood to shape policy. He must remain calm, even when reports bring news of death or defeat. That is the Stoic way, to meet fate not with denial, but with resolve. He speaks of fate often in his letters, not as an excuse, but as a reminder. We do not control what happens, but we control how we meet it. This is what he tells his generals. That the enemy may outnumber you, the weather may betray you, the plans may fall apart, but still your mind is your own. Still, you can choose courage over despair. Still, you can act with honor. And sometimes that is the only victory that matters. He thinks of the men who have fallen, names sent back in ink on thin parchment. Some he knew personally. Others he met only through stories. All are now part of the same silence. He feels their absence as a kind of shadow across the empire. He does not pretend their deaths were glorious, but he does believe they were meaningful if they met them with virtue. That is the Stoic belief, that the value of life is not in how long it lasts, but in how it is lived, and even a short life, lived rightly, is enough. The letters are finished now. He seals each one with wax, pressing his ring into the soft surface. The final gesture of his hand carries weight. These are not just words, they are acts. They are decisions sent out into a wild and uncertain world. But Marcus trusts the men who will receive them. He trusts that the virtues he cultivates in himself, patience, clarity, resilience, will echo in those who serve far from home. As he sets down the last scroll, the sky has shifted again. The light is softer, more golden, hinting at the approach of evening. He remains still for a moment, not tired, but full. He has not held a sword today, but he has led. He has not shouted, but he has spoken. And in this quiet work he has done what he must, not as a warrior, but as a man faithful to his task. A man who believes that in the face of war, the greatest weapon is not power, but wisdom. Sunset in the garden, observing the fall of day. The sun does not rush to set. It lowers slowly, and in its silence Marcus finds the truest kind of wisdom. The day has been long, letters written, choices made, thoughts weighed carefully one after another. Yet Marcus Aurelius does not go immediately to his quarters to rest. Instead, he walks once more into the garden, taking the same worn path beneath the olive and cypress trees, their leaves now flickering with gold as the sunlight softens and begins to disappear. This is his favorite hour, the hour when the world begins to quiet itself, not out of fatigue but out of understanding, an hour that expects nothing, demands nothing, only invites reflection. He reaches the bench, simple stone, cracked slightly along one edge, and lowers himself onto it with the deliberate ease of someone who is not in a hurry. Above him, the sky is beginning to shift. It's not quite orange yet, but the blue has thinned, and light falls through the trees in long, slanted stripes. The shadows are changing shape, stretching further across the tiled ground. He watches them move, not as a distraction, but as a meditation. The shadows say what no voice can say. Everything is moving. Everything is fading. There is a breeze now, warm but weakening, brushing lightly against his face and stirring the herbs nearby. Sage, rosemary, lavender. The scent reaches him in waves, mixed with the dry, earthy smell of stone warmed all day under the sun. He hears the quiet rhythm of cicadas, hidden among branches, singing their small and ancient song. It rises and falls in steady pulses, never in harmony, but never chaotic. He listens, eyes half closed, and lets the rhythm fill the space that thoughts usually occupy. He says nothing. There is no need for words. Thoughts rise, but he does not chase them. Some dissolve on their own, others linger. One in particular holds his attention, not sharp, not heavy, just true. So too your life fades. He doesn't flinch when it comes. He lets it arrive. He sits with it like an old companion. Everything that lives will pass. The sun lowers today, and it will do the same tomorrow and the day after that. One day, he will not be here to see it. But that doesn't make it tragic. It makes it beautiful. Because what fades is precious. What disappears reminds us to pay attention. The stretch of a shadow, the sound of dry leaves skittering across the path, the faint hum of wings drifting past his ear, all of it is temporary, and that is what makes it worth noticing. He remembers writing once that life is like a play, and each person must perform their role well, no matter how short the act. And here, now, in the stillness of dusk, he understands that again, not intellectually but completely. His role as emperor, as philosopher, as father, none of them exempt him from nature's laws. No one stands outside the order of things, and this setting sun, this fading warmth, this passing light, is nature's quiet way of reminding him. He watches as the colors begin to change more quickly. The edges of the sky grow soft with pink and then purple. The tops of the trees lose their glow, swallowed in the cooling air. A bird cuts across the sky, then another, heading toward their nests. The shadows now cover most of the garden floor, but they do not seem heavy. They feel like a soft hand being laid over the day, not to end it harshly, but to close it gently. He reflects on how many days he has seen the sun set from this very spot, how many evenings he's watched the light slip away, while his thoughts drifted from duty to philosophy and back again. Some days he was troubled, other days light-hearted. But the garden never changed. The sun always rose and always set, not for him, but with him. The universe moves with its own rhythm, and his task has never been to stop it, only to align himself with it, to move in time with what is. He thinks too about those who can't enjoy this moment. The soldiers on the frontier, the sick in the streets, the ones who have passed before him. He does not pity them. He honors them in his own way by not taking this hour for granted. He does not waste it with worry or try to stretch it longer than it wants to last. He accepts its impermanence, which is what allows him to feel it fully. The garden begins to darken and the air cools. He wraps his cloak a little tighter around his shoulders. He doesn't rise yet. He allows the silence to deepen, the space between each breath to widen. There is a kind of peace that only comes when one stops reaching, when one simply sits in what is. This is that kind of peace. No answers needed, no movement required, just presence. The stars will come soon. The torches will be lit in the palace corridors. Servants will ask if he needs anything. But for now, he is just a man sitting under the sky, watching the day complete itself without haste. The light will leave, the darkness will grow, and life, his life, will continue to move toward its own sunset. And that, he thinks, is not a reason for fear. It is a reason to live more gently, more attentively, more honestly. He stands slowly. The bench is now cold. He looks once more at the horizon where the last sliver of sun disappears. Then he walks back the way he came, through the garden that never hurries, never demands. The day is over, but it gave him all it had, and in return he gave it his full attention. That is enough. A quiet night with his children. The emperor lays aside his power. Tonight he is only a father. The room is dim, lit by a single oil lamp near the door, its soft glow warming the walls with a pale, flickering orange. A light breeze moves through the open shutters, stirring the linen curtains with the quiet rhythm of breath. Outside, the sounds of Rome grow faint, distant voices, the occasional clatter of sandals against stone. But in here, all is calm. Marcus Aurelius stands beside a small bed, his hands gently smoothing the linen blanket that covers one of his younger sons. The boy's eyes are heavy, half-lidded, still resisting sleep with the stubbornness of youth. In the next bed, a daughter curls beneath her own blanket, already on the edge of dreams. Another child, barely old enough to speak in full sentences, lies nestled against a small stuffed figure, a crude little lion made of wool, its mane unraveled from too much affection. Marcus lowers himself slowly onto a wooden stool placed between the beds. He doesn't speak right away. He simply watches his children, breathing slowly, deliberately, letting the silence wrap around them. They don't need to be entertained now. They need stillness, security, the quiet assurance that everything is okay, even if the world is large and strange and filled with questions. The little boy closest to him shifts under the covers. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" he asks, voice barely more than a whisper. "I will," Marcus replies softly, "as long as you need." The boy exhales, content. His head sinks deeper into the pillow. Marcus glances toward the window. The stars are just beginning to appear, dim points of light slowly unfolding in the sky. He remembers being their age, when the night was larger, darker, unknown. He remembers the feeling of being small, of wanting to be held just a little longer, just until the quiet didn't feel so empty anymore. He leans forward slightly and begins to speak, not loudly, not as an orator or a philosopher, but as a father guiding his children gently towards sleep. "Even emperors must sleep," he says, almost to himself. "Even the sun must set, and so must we." He looks at each of them, their small bodies stilled by fatigue. "You've done enough for today. You laughed, you ran, you played, you made mistakes, and you learned. That is a complete day. Nothing else is needed." The daughter stirs, her eyes opening briefly. "I was mean to my brother," she mumbles, "when he knocked over my blocks." Marcus smiles gently. "Yes, I saw. And you were angry, that is human. But you also helped him clean them up. That is better." She seems to think about this, then nods once and closes her eyes again. He sits back in his chair, watching as their breathing slows. One hand rests on the edge of the stool, the other on his lap, open, relaxed. There is something sacred about this moment, he thinks. Not because it is grand, but because it is real. There are no titles here, no senate, no imperial seal, no decisions, only the steady movement of breath. Only the heartbeat of a father sitting beside his children in the quiet dark. He speaks again, more to them than to himself now. "Do you know what the stars do while we sleep?" One of the boys opens an eye, curious but silent. They wait and shine. Not to be seen, but because that is what they do. Just like the trees wait in silence, just like the wind whispers across the roofs. The world doesn't sleep like we do, but it becomes quiet. It softens. It allows itself to be still. He pauses, letting the words settle. "We do not need to hold everything all at once," he says. We do not need to understand all things. Sometimes we just need to rest. The world will still be here tomorrow. The children are quiet now. Even the youngest one, who had been fidgeting with his toy lion, has gone still. The room is warm with the weight of sleep just beneath the surface. And in that warmth, Marcus feels something loosen in himself, a tension he hadn't noticed before, melting away. He speaks again, this time lower, slower. Life is not always easy, even for emperors. There are days when things fall apart, when people are unfair, when we feel tired, even before the day begins. But each night we are given a gift, this time now where we can put it all down, set it beside us, and close our eyes. He runs a hand gently across the edge of the blanket, adjusting it slightly over his daughter's shoulder. We will never be perfect, he continues, but we are allowed to rest. Not because we earned it by being perfect, but because we are alive, and because we've tried. He glances again toward the window. The stars are brighter now, still quiet, still patient. The littlest one speaks up suddenly, sleep-dazed. "Are you going to die, Papa?" Marcus does not flinch. He nods slowly, calmly. Yes, one day. The child doesn't respond, just watches him with wide eyes. "And so will you," Marcus adds. "So will everyone. But not tonight. Tonight is for sleep." The boy seems to accept this, rolling onto his side, pressing the lion against his cheek. Marcus feels no urge to say more. Some questions do not need to be solved with long answers. Sometimes it's enough to simply meet them with honesty and love. The room grows still once more. Their breathing deepens one by one. A quiet orchestra of slumber, the rise and fall of their small chests, the twitch of a hand under a blanket, a sigh, a stretch, a soft yawn. Marcus remains seated. He does not move. He thinks of how temporary these nights are. One day these beds will be empty. These children will be taller. They will face fears he cannot soothe with a hand on the shoulder or a few whispered words. One day they will go into the world, and he will not always be there to walk beside them. So he stays. He stays now, while he still can. He is not trying to preserve the moment. He knows better. Everything fades, everything ends, but that's what makes this silence worth everything. He does not take it for granted. He speaks once more, barely audible now. Even the stars will go out one day, but tonight they shine, and so do you. A breeze moves again through the window, this time softer, as if acknowledging the stillness inside. The flame of the lamp flickers and dims. Marcus rises slowly, carefully. He does not want to wake them. He pulls each blanket a little tighter, adjusts a pillow, leans down to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. Then, with one final glance, he steps out of the room, into the long corridor of the quiet palace. Behind him, the children sleep, wrapped in warmth and breath and the slow rhythm of night. And Marcus walks on, into the silence, into the deepening dark, carrying nothing but peace. Evening reading and final meditations. As the city quiets and the sky turns to shadow, Marcus Aurelius turns inward once more, this time to bring the day to a thoughtful close. The palace is quiet now. Most of the servants have retired to their quarters, and the halls that echoed with footsteps and formal announcements now hold only stillness. In his private chamber, Marcus Aurelius sits by the dim glow of an oil lamp, its flame flickering gently, casting long soft shadows against the walls. The day is nearly done. The noise, the duties, the voices of others, they have all fallen away. What remains is just him, the silence, and a few pages left to write. He reaches for one of his favorite scrolls and unrolls it slowly, careful not to tear the parchment's aged edges. The philosopher's words before him are familiar. He's read them before, many times. But tonight he reads them aloud, under his breath, barely more than a whisper. There's a rhythm to this ritual, an intimacy, as if saying the words out loud helps settle them deeper into the soul. Sometimes he reads Plato, sometimes Epictetus. Tonight it is probably Heraclitus or Zeno, but the name on the scroll doesn't matter. What matters is the act, the return to thought, to truth, to the deep conversation between the self and the world that began long before he was born and will continue long after he is gone. He reads a few lines slowly, letting each phrase hang in the air before moving to the next. His voice is soft, roughened slightly by age and wear, but steady. He's not reading for entertainment. He's reading to remember, to reflect, to hold the mirror of philosophy up to his own life and ask, did I live today in alignment with this, or did I stray? After a while, he sets the scroll aside and picks up his tablet, his journal. The wax is fresh, the stylus cool in his hand. He does not write for anyone else. These are not letters, they are not teachings, they are not confessions to be judged. They are simply observations written with the same honesty he would expect from a friend. He writes without decorating his thoughts. He doesn't try to sound wise. He writes about what he struggled with today, what thoughts pulled him away from reason, what emotions clouded his clarity. He recalls the moment he felt irritation in the council chamber when an advisor spoke out of turn. He didn't raise his voice, didn't act on the anger, but the feeling was there. He writes it down, not to scold himself, but to recognize it. That recognition, he knows, is the beginning of mastery. There can be no improvement without awareness. And so, he writes about that small failure, not with shame, but with curiosity. Then he writes of a moment of restraint, a small but meaningful one, when he chose not to interrupt, when he waited before responding, when he remembered to ask, what would the wise man do? These moments too matter, not because they are impressive, but because they show that progress is possible. The path of virtue is not a perfect line, it is a winding road, marked by both missteps and better choices. He writes a single sentence and pauses. Do not expect Plato's Republic. He lets the words sit on the tablet for a moment before moving on. He's written this before. It's one of his clearest reminders to himself, not to lower his standards, but to soften his expectations. The world will never be ideal. People will fall short. Circumstances will frustrate. Even he, the emperor, will fail. And that's not a flaw in the design. That's the nature of life. He looks around his chamber, the plain furniture, the unadorned walls, the open window that lets in the night air. Everything here is simple, chosen to reflect a life that strives for clarity, not clutter. He finds comfort in that. Not the comfort of softness, but the comfort of knowing that nothing around him distracts him from the truth. He sets the stylus down and closes the tablet. The act of writing, though brief, has loosened the grip of the day. He no longer carries the weight of decisions or conversations or small irritations. He has given them their place, seen them clearly, and let them go. That, he believes, is one of the greatest gifts of self-reflection, not the erasing of faults, but the quiet laying down of burdens. Outside, the wind brushes gently against the window frame. A few leaves flutter. The city, though still awake in its corners, is mostly asleep. He thinks of the people, the workers, the guards, the children, the sick. Each one living their own version of this day. Each one trying in their own way to make sense of life, to endure it, to find peace within it. He wonders briefly what tomorrow will bring. More decisions, more conflict, more small joys and small frustrations. And yet he feels no dread, he feels ready. Not because he expects things to go smoothly, but because he has trained his mind to meet whatever comes. That is the only preparation that matters. Not controlling the world, but preparing the soul to greet it with openness and reason. As the oil lamp begins to dim, he leans back and closes his eyes. His breathing is slow, his body tired, but his mind is not racing. It is calm, anchored, rooted in the knowledge that he did what he could today, and tomorrow he will begin again. He whispers to himself, not as a prayer, but as a reminder. If you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. Then he lets go of thought, lets go of control, and allows himself to rest. Not because everything is perfect, but because he has accepted that it doesn't need to be. Preparing for sleep, letting go. The day is done. The emperor prepares not just to sleep, but to surrender. The last of the oil lamps flickers low as Marcus Aurelius rises from his seat. His legs are a little heavier now, the weight of the day settling into his joints. But there is no tension in his face, no burden in his movement. He walks slowly toward his sleeping quarters where the air is cooler, quieter. A single servant awaits by the door, holding a soft woven robe. Marcus nods and takes it without a word. There is no need for ceremony, no grand ritual, only a simple act, the shedding of the day. He undresses quietly, folding his garments with care and placing them on a wooden stool by the bed. Then he steps toward the basin once more where fresh water has been left. He washes his face and hands, slowly, methodically. The water is cool, waking the skin one last time before rest. He runs his fingers through his beard, wipes his face with a cloth and then simply breathes. He does not speak. He doesn't need to. The silence around him is enough. Inhale, exhale. That's all that matters now. The body, like the mind, needs to release what it has carried. The noise of the day, the emotions stirred by meetings, the weight of judgments and decisions, all of it must be allowed to pass. He does not try to solve anything now. He does not replay conversations or anticipate tomorrow. He knows that kind of thinking has no place here. Now is the time to let go. He slips into the sleeping robe, a plain, comfortable garment made of wool. It is unadorned, soft from use. As it drapes over his shoulders, he feels the day fall away with it. No more titles, no more tasks, just a man, a body, a mind returning to stillness. He walks to the edge of the bed and sits for a moment, feeling the floor beneath his feet, steadying himself. He reflects, not with effort, but with ease. How strange it is, he thinks, that we do this every night, retreat from the world, lie down, close our eyes, and surrender control. Sleep is the closest thing to death that life offers each day, and yet we resist neither. We accept sleep because we trust the body to breathe, to restore, to wake. But death we fear, even though it may not be so different. He has often written of this, that sleep and death are brothers, and that there is no need to dread what comes naturally. Death smiles at us all, he had once written. All a man can do is smile back. He whispers this line to himself now, not dramatically but softly, like a lullaby meant not for children, but for the part of the soul that forgets how to rest. There is something calming in that idea, to smile back at death. Not as defiance, but as acceptance, as a way of saying, I know you are there. I know you will come, but not tonight. Tonight, I sleep. He thinks about how he might not wake tomorrow. This is not a morbid thought to him. It is liberating. It makes this moment sacred, the act of lying down, of closing his eyes, of pulling the blanket over his chest, each one a quiet farewell just in case. And because of that possibility, he gives the moment his full attention. He does not beg for more time. He does not wish for immortality. He only asks for clarity, while he is alive, to live with presence, with discipline, with kindness. And if this night is his last, then let it be said that he ended it in peace. He lies back on the firm mattress. The room is dark now, save for the faintest glow of moonlight through the window. He folds his hands gently across his stomach and closes his eyes. His breath slows. His body begins to sink. His mind, usually active, begins to quiet. The thoughts come like soft waves, but they no longer pull him. They wash past without resistance. There is no fear, no expectation, no demand that tomorrow be anything other than what it will be. He does not need to know the future. He only needs to rest. The past is behind him. The duties of the day are complete. There is nothing left to do, and for Marcus, that is enough. If sleep is a rehearsal for death, then let it be a graceful one. Let it be honest. Let it come without resistance. He surrenders to it, not because he is weak, but because he is wise enough to know that some things must be let go of gently. And so the emperor, philosopher, and man drifts into sleep, not with anxiety but with acceptance. His last waking thought is not a fear, not a wish, but a truth. To let go is not to lose, it is to trust. the philosophers surrender to the night. Marcus lies still beneath his blanket, eyes gently closed, body motionless except for the slow rise and fall of his chest. The world around him has disappeared into shadow. The flickering lamplight has long faded, and the soft murmur of Rome beyond the palace walls has quieted into the low hum of night. No one calls for him now. No messengers approach. No voices break the silence. In this final hour there is no expectation, no obligation, just breath and the space between each breath. He does not reach for thoughts, he does not push them away either. Whatever lingers in the mind, he lets it come. The day is over, the decisions have been made. Some were wise, others perhaps less so, but all of them belong to the past now. He accepts this, not out of indifference but out of understanding. No one can change what has already happened. The only thing one can do is meet it fully and then let it go. His breathing is slower now, deeper. It carries no tension, no urgency. With each exhale something is released, a small weight, a fading worry, a whisper of responsibility. He does not count these breaths. He does not control them. They simply happen, like the rustling of leaves, like the movement of stars. And this too he welcomes, the reminder that nature is at work even when he is not. He trusts nature completely. It has guided every moment of his life from birth to now. It has carried him through growth, pain, love, and loss. It will carry him through sleep and eventually through death. There is no need to fight it. There is no need to be afraid. To surrender to sleep is to say, I have done enough for one day. Let the world continue without me for a while. The silence deepens, not an empty silence, but a full one. A silence that holds everything together, like the stillness of a calm sea or the hush before dawn. In this silence, Marcus feels no separation between himself and the world. The walls around him seem to vanish. The bed beneath him becomes part of the earth. The air he breathes becomes indistinguishable from the air outside the palace. He is no longer an emperor or even a man with a name. He is simply a part of life, like a tree resting under the moonlight, like a river slowed by nightfall. He accepts everything, not just what went well, but also what didn't. He does not ask to rewrite the day. He does not wish for more hours. He holds no grudge against himself. Whatever moments of frustration or weakness arose, he has met them. He has faced them with what strength and honesty he could. That is all any person can do. And so he forgives himself, not with words, but with stillness. There are no speeches in his head, no dramatic goodbyes. Sleep does not need to be earned with effort or fought with resistance. It comes when one stops grasping, and Marcus has stopped grasping. He holds nothing now, not thoughts, not plans, not regrets. His hands are empty, his heart is quiet. The stars outside continue their silent drift. The city sleeps. Somewhere a soldier dreams on watch. A child curls up in her blanket. A dog rests beside its owner's door. All of life, from the palace to the poorest street, has slowed. This is the rhythm of the world, and Marcus allows himself to fall into it completely. He does not think of tomorrow. Tomorrow will bring what it brings, maybe more challenges, maybe some joy, maybe both. But it is not here now. What is here is this breath, this stillness, this space. He no longer hears the wind, or the occasional creak of wood, or the distant hoot of an owl. His body feels lighter, as if it has merged with the blanket, with the bed, with the floor beneath it. His mind is no longer sorting, judging, analyzing. It has softened, like clay that has finally stopped being shaped. Now it rests in its natural form. This is not death, but it is a kind of rehearsal for it. A gentle reminder that letting go is not the same as losing. That surrender is not failure, it is a return to the simplicity of just being. Without titles, without fears, without striving. And so Marcus Aurelius, emperor, philosopher, father, student, drifts away, into sleep, into the arms of nature, into the great quiet rhythm that holds all things. There is nothing more to say, there is nothing more to be done. Only stillness, only breath, and then only peace. The night watches in silence. Now there is nothing left to hold, nothing to resist. The night watches in silence, and Marcus Aurelius sleeps. The chamber is now fully dark. The lamp has gone out, its last drop of oil consumed long ago. The window is open just enough to let in the soft night air, cool and steady, carrying with it the distant scent of cypress trees and the faintest echo of the city that never fully sleeps. But in here, in this quiet corner of the world, everything is still. Marcus Aurelius lies completely at rest. His body has settled into the shape of the bed, no longer holding tension, no longer preparing for action. His chest rises and falls gently, rhythmically, like the slow tide of a quiet sea. He is not asleep yet, not fully, but he is no longer entirely awake either. He is floating between two worlds, one of thought, the other of silence, and it is in this in-between space that a deeper kind of understanding takes root. His eyes are closed, not squeezed shut, not forced, just closed in the natural way a flower folds at night, soft and unresisting. The lines of his face have softened. The weight of the day has been released. All the words he spoke, all the decisions he made, all the concerns that once pulled at the edge of his mind, they no longer cling to him. He has let them go. There is nothing left for him to carry now. The emperor's robe is folded in the corner. The stylus rests on the table beside a closed wax tablet. The scrolls have been returned to their shelves. The doors are shut. The servants have withdrawn. The world does not need him in this moment, and that, he understands, is a gift. To be unneeded. To be allowed to return to something more basic, more essential, to simply being. Outside, the stars have begun their slow procession across the sky. They move as they always have, as they always will, in silence and precision, without concern for who watches or who does not. Marcus cannot see them now, but he knows they are there, just as he knows the Tiber still flows in the distance, just as he knows the market will wake again at dawn, just as he knows that his own body, even as it rests, continues its mysterious and faithful work, repairing, restoring, renewing. The city sleeps, or tries to. Some are awake, the lonely, the restless, the ones guarding gates or pacing rooftops, but most have closed their eyes. Most have returned to the place where time no longer moves in minutes or duties, but in breath. A sleeping city is a vulnerable thing, but it is also a peaceful thing. The weight of ambition is set down. The hunger for praise is paused, even the mighty rest. Marcus reflects on this as he lies still, not in active thought, but in the way that truth rises quietly when the noise is gone. He thinks of how much time is spent reaching for more certainty, more control, more accomplishment. But now, in this hour, he sees clearly that the deepest truths are not things you reach for. They are things you return to, like breath, like sleep, like the silence that was there before you were born and will be there after you're gone. The Stoics taught that we are part of nature, not apart from it, that we are not visitors here, but participants, and what nature does, we too must do. The tree rests at night, the river slows in winter, the animal curls into its den, the stars dim until morning. So why should the mind resist what everything else in creation accepts without fear? He recalls his own words, written years ago but still true tonight. Death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back. And perhaps this is what sleep is, a soft rehearsal for that final letting go, a chance to surrender, not in defeat but in trust, to close the eyes without clinging, to release thought, breath, control, and fall gently into the arms of what cannot be controlled. He does not fear this, he honors it, because the end of a day, like the end of a life, is not something to fight. It is something to enter with grace, with understanding, with peace. His breathing deepens. Each inhale is long, each exhale longer. There is no effort behind it now. The breath is breathing him. The body knows what to do. It has always known. It does not ask for attention. It only asks for stillness. The room holds its silence. The shadows stretch across the walls, soft and unmoving. The furniture is undisturbed. Even time seems slower here. Each second passes without urgency. And in this suspended quiet, Marcus falls deeper, into sleep, into rest, into the vast dark sea that holds the whole world every night. Nothing troubles him now. The empire can wait. The letters can wait. Even his thoughts can wait. What matters now is only this moment of peace, this breath, this surrender. He has accepted everything, all that he was today. The successes, the mistakes, the moments of clarity and the moments of confusion. He does not sort through them now. He does not try to judge them. He simply accepts them as a painter steps back from a canvas. It is finished for now. It may not be perfect, but it is complete. And in that completion, there is freedom. There is nothing left to prove, no role to play, no title to wear, just a man lying in bed as countless others do across the world, noble and poor, old and young, weak and strong. In the dark, all are equal. In sleep, all are returned to the same stillness. He lets himself drift fully now. No resistance, no thoughts reaching back toward the day or forward toward tomorrow. If a thought comes, he watches it pass. Like a leaf floating down a stream, it moves past him and disappears. There is no need to follow. The deeper he falls, the quieter the world becomes. The wind softens. The sounds outside dissolve into a gentle hum. Even the beating of his heart feels slower, farther away. Everything grows lighter. Even his body, once heavy with effort, now feels like air, like mist, like breath. This is the wisdom of the night, that you are not separate from the world but part of it, that you are not meant to hold everything or fix everything or be everything. You are meant to live fully, and then at the end of each day, to lay it all down. Marcus understands this, not as a lesson, not as a philosophy, but as a quiet truth that only reveals itself when all else is silent. And now, in the full stillness of the hour, that truth surrounds him like a blanket, warm, gentle, final. And so the night watches. The stars turn overhead unseen. The earth breathes beneath. The world continues to move, slowly, gracefully, without demand. And Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, philosopher of discipline, student of nature, sleeps. Not because he escaped his duty, but because he fulfilled it. Not because he was perfect, but because he was present. And now there is nothing left to do. Only this, to rest, to return, to release, and finally, to be still.